So as Chris said, I'm Nick Sweeney. I'm an applications engineer here with Inflow Technology. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about copy tree versus branch. What are the benefits of both? How do you use each one? And maybe a situation when you would use one over the other. So before I get started, I do want to introduce who Inflow is because some of you may not be familiar. Computer-aided technology has their hands in a lot of different businesses. So everything from your design with SOLIDWORKS 3D to your simulation with SOLIDWORKS and Simulia, and even 3D printing. But PDM and PLM has become such a huge part of the business that there's a dedicated group of people in CATI that work for Inflow. And we are dedicated to the PDM, PLM, SOLIDWORKS PDM, Innovia, DriveWorks, SOLIDWORKS Manage. All of those go through the Inflow channel. I'm going to be going through the copy tree versus branch. So here I have some background about what each tool is. So copy tree, if you've ever been inside of SOLIDWORKS and you're not operating in the vault, copy tree is very similar to the SOLIDWORKS Pack and Go feature. It allows you to keep all of your references intact. You make a copy of your assembly or your part, I guess, and you can put it anywhere you want and work on it independently without having to risk changing your original models. Issue with this is that the files lose their reference to the original. So if you wanted to take that copy and have that be your new version of it, or maybe your first revision, you would have to replace your original versus just being able to go to a different version or revision of it. Exclude your library parts. So a lot of people would be using copy tree and you don't want to have your SOLIDWORKS toolbox inside of every single pack and go you do because those parts likely aren't changing. So you can exclude those parts so you don't have to worry about it, and that's fewer copies of the same file over and over. The point I'm going to make now, and then I will be revisiting it later, is that copies have to go through a workflow. So with copy tree, every time you want to make a change, you have to send it all the way through that revision process each time. So if you're in the approved state, you would have to go to under change and keep going through a revision over and over until you're happy. Which is a similar function to copy tree because it's the same idea as the SOLIDWORKS Pack and Go. However, files keep their reference to the originals. So with branch and merge, you have the ability to work on a file and treat it as just a design change, something you're testing out. And then once you're done with it, you can relink it to the original without having to re-update all of your references. With copy tree, you are able to exclude your library parts. So again, we don't want to make copies unnecessarily of parts that aren't changing. And branches do not have to go through workflow. So I said I would go back to the copy trees do have to go through workflow. A branch is a great situation if you're trying out 2, 3, 4 different design changes. Maybe you're just trying to make something more lightweight and you want to try some different designs to run your simulations. Branches, each of these designs could be their own separate parts, but you don't have to send them through an approval process. Instead, what you can do is you can make your changes, you can run your simulations, decide which one is best, and then by using the merge feature, link it back to the original, and you can make it your Rev A or your version B kind of thing. But you don't have to send it through that entire approval process over and over for all 3 design changes. Tree, if you wanted to make 3 design changes, 3 different attempts to make this item more lightweight, you would have to send it through 3 different approval processes and have 3 different designs. So then that's extra clicks, that's extra work having to go through that entire process, versus with branch, you only have to go through it one time and just pick your favorite one. Making a design change, what are some other things that copy tree gives us and other things that branch and merge gives us? Copy tree and branch both let us copy the entire project tree with version history. So we have that history dating back to before we did the copy tree. We aren't going to lose all of that information when we do that copy. Copy tree, we can't work on multiple project versions all at the same time. Branch and merge, like I said, you can work on 3 or 4 or as many different design ideas as you want, and then you just pick your favorite and bring it back. With copy tree, you'd have to make separate models and they're not linked to each other. does keep that relational data back to the original project data. So like I said, you can tie it back to the original and make it your Rev A, your Rev B, your version B. Do all of that with branch and merge versus copy tree. You can't do that. You have to relink the references. And this is losing a little bit of its sheen since we're coming out with 2020. But if you're using anything before SOLIDWORKS PDM 2018, copy tree is only going to be available to you instead of branch and merge. Branch and merge was new as of PDM 2018. Agenda for today. Well, I've gone through the first one a little bit, but how can we use each tool? So I'll be going through that in my demo environment. I'll also be going through what do these dialog boxes look like? What kind of options do we have? How do we maximize our use of copy tree and branch? Going through some additional settings we have. So behind the scenes work, not your standard, okay, we have the buttons here and then we have this dialog box and that's it. I'll be talking about some of the behind the scenes settings that we can change. Say why we might want to use one or the other. So I'll talk about different situations for trying each one. I've already touched on it a little bit, but I'm going to go into it a little bit more in detail. Switch over to my virtual machine. Right here is my demo environment. If you've ever seen a SOLIDWORKS PDM demonstration, this will likely look very familiar to you. So down here on the bottom, we have the preview of exactly what I'm looking at. I'm looking at an assembly. And in our standard demo, what we do is we make changes to this gear. You know, we might want to make it more lightweight because it seems a little bit over-engineered. So the way we always do that is with copy tree. So I'll go through that tool first. See, copy tree and branch is you have your assembly or your part or drawing selected. Going to tools, and then you can go down to copy tree. And we can also see branch and move tree and several different ideas. If you're curious about copy tree versus move tree, one of my former colleagues, Emily, did a webinar last year all about copy tree versus move tree. That's on our YouTube page as well, so I highly recommend checking that out. The dialog box for copy tree. This is what we're going to be seeing. We get to choose the destination for these files. Where do we want to save this assembly? So we can choose a location inside the vault to make sure that we keep everything intact. The default location on this is the same folder, but you can make it anywhere you want. You can put it in the root of the vault. You can make a whole new folder. It's all up to you. You can browse or you can use the dropdown. Settings go. The settings are pretty cool with what you can include. We get to include things like our simulation data and our drawings. So we're not going to lose our references to these additional files. We aren't just keeping our normal SOLIDWORKS files. We're keeping everything associated with this document. We can also name our drawings after our models. So if you look down in my in all of my different files in here, you can see the drawing and the assembly have the same name, just a different file extension at the end. Preserve the relative paths. So if you've got a folder structure, then using the relative paths will actually maintain that folder structure as you go. And you can also regenerate your serial numbers in the cards. So if you're already generating serial numbers for your parts, or you're doing that in the cards section, you would regenerate them inside of the cards. On the upper right, we have our transform options. So these can be really useful if we want to maybe create a whole new part for a different customer. Maybe another customer has ordered this assembly and we want to denote it as specifically theirs. Like prefix. And we could go something like cust1 and apply that to all files. If we have a certain file selected, we can choose to use only the selected. If we did OK, the files turn yellow. And if we scroll over to the right, the target file name now has CUST-1 and then the original file name. Want CUST-1. Maybe you want it to be, instead of CUST-1, you replace it with C-1-, because you might notice that the 1 kind of runs into my normal number. And you can choose, again, all files or just the selected. We've now updated all of those file names a second time without any additional effort. You can also add a suffix, so same thing as the prefix, it just goes at the end. And we can choose to rename our parts with a serial number. The serial number, we can choose any of the ones that we have, and we can choose to apply it to assemblies, drawings, parts, or any combination of the three. something like the item number, serial number, or the NCR. We can choose whichever one we want to use. So that would let us rename all of our models based off of these serial numbers. See how that would update. This can be somewhat overwhelming, just the sheer number of files. I only have 19 in here, but you could have an assembly that has hundreds or thousands of files, and this can get somewhat overwhelming. Filter, and we can sort these down by the specific file name. Maybe you already know what it's called, so you can use the filter in here to find exactly what you're looking for. Filter it by file type. Look for the copy. Yes, it's selected, or no, it's not selected. Done with the copy tree, you need to enter in a comment, or it's typically best practice to enter in a comment, just explaining why you want to do something with that. So that comment will go in the history so that we know exactly why we made this copy. Okay. New customer, something like that. The basics of what goes into copy tree. So that's the standard dialog box, but what additional settings do we have with copy tree? So if I go over to my administration tool, my administrators group, just because it's the group I'm already in, you can go to copy tree over on the left-hand side, and you can choose to exclude certain folders from copy tree. A folder that's dedicated very specifically for your library parts. You can choose to always have that folder excluded from copy tree. So then users will get a warning if they're trying to copy them, just letting them know you're not going to have a copy of these files because they are excluded specifically from the copy. If you click on the settings dialog down here, the settings button, select copy tree, and you can choose to have certain variables update. File type, so in this case, I would do all file types. Add a certain variable that we wanted to update whenever we copied. We could go through here and select whatever that one is. Maybe we just wanted to update the copyright variable, have that be the date, have that be today's date. So now the copyright variable will update every time we do a copy tree. So that can be really handy, just if you don't want your designers to have to remember variables to update. By using this, that helps automate that process. Branch. Why would we use branch instead? And what does branch afford us to do that copy tree does not? You get to it the same way. And select branch. Dialog is very, very similar to the original copy tree dialog. But at the very top, we have the choice to give our branch a name. So this comes into play when you're looking at your associated branches. We called it design change 1. That's going to show up when we look at our associated branches. And again, we choose the default destination as we would any other time. And we get to choose our additional settings. So things like include the simulations and the drawings. If we want to keep all of those same settings the same. You can add your transform options. So again, your prefix, your suffix, you can rename things with the serial number and you can replace. All of these individually as well. So maybe you don't want to add a prefix to all files. Maybe you don't even have a selected few. You just want to change the names as you go. On a file and go over to the branch name. Actually change the name of that file right here in this dialog. You can do this one by one for every single file as you go, if you chose to do it that way. So you could call this the master assembly. SLD ASM. That name is highlighted blue because it's different than it was initially. And we can add a prefix and a suffix as well if we wanted to. Choose to check in these files after you branch them. So then you would be able to start taking them through that whole workflow and see how that would work. Have to check them in after a branch. Choose the branch option that the file starts to copy. It copies the entire assembly and all of these referenced files. So if I wanted to include a drawing, it will branch that as well. This folder. The master assembly.sldasm. is a copy of the original file. The difference is that this file is a branch and it's associated. So if you go and look at the history, that it was created and it's branched design change 1 up to the original assembly. Tools, associated branches, and we can see design change 1. So maybe we were trying out 3 separate designs. As we do in the demonstration, we change it between slots and we do just holes in this gear. So we would have design change 1 for the slots, design change 2 for the holes. In what situation does that make the most sense? Well, if you're trying out a lot of different designs, then it makes sense to do something like a branch, because a branch, you're trying out different things. And then once you choose your favorite, all you have to do is go to the branch that you want to use as your master or as your next revision. Tool. Haven't made any changes to it yet, but this dialog looks pretty familiar. It looks very similar. So the new file options, you can include things like your simulation and your drawings. You can regenerate your serial numbers, and you can name your drawings after the models. A whole new name if you want. And if you've decided that this is the master, this is exactly what I want as my design change, you've settled on this new iteration, you can do a check-in on merge. For a comment, depending on how your vault is set up, you may or may not have to give us a comment for why. Merge, that becomes your next version. Or you can also have it be your new revision if you would choose to have it that way. Other options do we have with the branch and merge? Same as before, if we go into the administrator tool and we open up the group, these are group permissions, not user permissions. You can click on branch, and again, we can exclude from branch. We can choose to have a specific folder excluded. Again, if we have library parts, this is how we would ensure that we aren't making additional copies of parts that we don't need to copy. That's how that is set up. And you can go to settings as well, and you can go to branch. And same idea as before, you can update a variable as you go. So further automating that process and ensuring that your users are getting the most out of their tool. With the merge. So when you go through the merge, you could update a variable. Maybe you have a variable called merged, and you wanted to update that with today's date. That is how you would do something like that. Some of the additional options for when you would use branch versus copy tree. Get out of my virtual machine. We really went over how we can use each tool. By going through a very straightforward dialog, it helps us make copies of our files for use in different situations. I showed you what the boxes look like and how all of those different options are applied to each other. Set that up. I went over the fact that you can rename your files in mass, you can rename a selected few, or you can do it one by one, choosing how each file is renamed and exactly how you want it to be. Use some additional settings. So if you wanted to have additional options, if you wanted to update variables as you went, you can now have that be automated. So your users don't even have to think about it as they go through and check in their files. I want to use one over the other. Well, branching is a great way for you to try out different designs that you don't want to send through an entire workflow. You may want to use copy tree if you've got users that are creating custom models for different customers. So the models aren't related to each other anyway, outside of they're just the master ones. Branch and merge for those design iterations or those revisions. Thank you all for coming to this webinar today. And if you have any questions, please let us know.
Thank you very much, Nick, for putting this webcast together. From my standpoint, extremely informative, very easy to understand. So thank you again for sharing all this information with us. I would also like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We like to keep these very short and to the point, just hit a couple of really nice, concise topics. So again, if there are any questions, please let us know. I sent out a link for the YouTube channel where all of these videos will eventually be uploaded to, as well as the link to our Design Innovation Month portion of the CATI website. see if there's other topics anyone's interested in, and you can go ahead and sign up for them. And hopefully I will see one of you in a future webcast. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.